of some very serious pain. For some of you, it's physical pain. No matter what you do, you just can't seem to rid yourself of that pain. It seems so unfair. For others, it might be an intolerable working situation, or maybe the pain of rejection. It may be that a husband, wife, parent, or child is taking advantage of you even though you're trying to treat them as nicely as you possibly can. It may be that a friend has turned against you due to some type of misunderstanding that you did from the purest moments of your heart. You never intended it to be that way. Or it may be simply the ongoing pressure of not being able to pay your bills when the ungodly around you seem to be getting rich. You ever do that? You ever sit around and feel sorry for yourself because the money's just not coming in to pay the bills, and you look at people who could care less about God and care less about Christ, and they seem to be getting very wealthy? You feel sorry for yourself? Such feelings can grind away at your peace so severely that you sometimes wonder how you can continue. It's important for us to know that our present suffering has a purpose. It does have a purpose. The point that James is driving home here is just as important to know that even though our suffering has a purpose, our suffering is also only temporary. We'll only suffer for a short time. If you discover you have cancer, you know without a doubt one day you will be completely healed and back to normal. Even though you don't know how long a period of time of suffering that will be, that knowledge of your future recovery will dramatically affect your attitude during that sickness. You see, because of Christ's death and His resurrection, although you are experiencing pain in this world, you know that there's a world coming where there'll be no pain. You know that your suffering, no matter how severe it might be, is short, because there's coming a time when you will rest in His arms, when you will be in heaven where there is no pain, there is no suffering. And my friends, that's why James said, be patient and understand the Lord is coming. We find solace in that. We find peace in that to get us through every situation. The Bible gives us unusual metaphors to picture this new world that's coming. Streets of gold, gates of pearl. Seems so beautiful, doesn't it? But whatever heaven is, it will banish all the discomfort of this life and usher in a new, unimaginable pleasure. That's what heaven is. We have shadows of it now, but we have fleeting longings for some profound joy which escapes us so quickly here, but when we get there will fill us for all eternity. As if today we are in a dark room and little bits of light are starting to creep in. Glimpses of virtue, glory, joy, subtle hints of truth and justice, all convincing us that beyond those walls, beyond this life as we know it, exists a world that is worth all that we suffer for while we are here. James tells us in verse 7 that this new world breaks in on us at the return of Christ, that we are to be like a patient farmer who waits for the land to yield its valuable crop. We are to see how patient that farmer is. If you've ever farmed, you know that you have to be patient. Farmers are very patient people, aren't they? They have to be. There are natural laws in the physical world that he has to rely upon. So the good farmer is not anxious. He does not fight the sometimes painful process required of him. Instead, he draws strength in the present sufferings by always keeping in mind the big picture, the harvest that is coming. That's what the farmer does. Even when he gets down, he's thinking about the big picture, the harvest which is coming after the rains come and the crop is harvested. Similarly, we must in our spiritual life find comfort in the fact that God is always on His down to the crux of it. You see, we want things done on our time. We really mean it when we say, Lord, grant me patience and give it to me now. We really mean that. Because we want everything done on our timetable. But it's done on God's timetable, not ours. Why is it that the tires go flat when you're in a hurry to keep an appointment? Why does the vacuum cleaner suddenly stop working the day you've got all kinds of company coming over? But a more important question is, why are we so impatient and angry when these things happen? And we are, aren't we? If we're on our way to an appointment and we have a flat tire or get stuck in traffic or whatever, we get so mad, so angry, so impatient, don't we? If you've got a house full of company coming over and you're trying to vacuum the house and clean it up and your vacuum cleaner breaks, oh, you're going to be mad, aren't you? You're going to be impatient, aren't you? You see, in essence, our impatience and anger at such times is directed really towards God and His timetable. Now, I want you to stop and think about this. Because, you see, the events in our lives, even the flat tires, the time we spend in traffic, the broken vacuum cleaner, the events in our life, all of these are scheduled according to His time, not our time. You and I are usually unaware of that, and we usually don't appreciate it, but we have to come to a point that we understand that. The reason why impatience and anger is such a serious sin in the eyes of God is because it leaves God out of our thinking. It is a snub directed at His plan and timetable for our life, and God doesn't like that. You see, you thought you had to be at that appointment at that particular time. Maybe God thought you needed to be somewhere else. Maybe God thought that you needed to be on the side of the road fixing a flat tire because somebody who would stop and help you, you would say something to that would mean something to them. You see, you don't know what's going on in God's plan. All we want to do is get mad because we can't do it our way. But God's timetable is totally different. Maybe that vacuum cleaner quit the day that all that company was coming over because God knew you needed to have dirty carpet, because maybe He needed your visitors to be encouraged by your lack of perfection. Maybe He needed to humble you. Or maybe He needed you to be doing something else besides vacuum the carpet. Maybe He needed you to be reading the Bible at that time. Maybe He needed you to be praying at that time. Maybe He needed you to be talking to your kids, your grandkids, or whatever. You see, we don't understand God's timetable, but He does have one. And no matter what is going on in our life, He is at work. And there is a reason for it. Second thing I want to talk about is God's servants have always grown in patience through their suffering. Verses 10 through 11, James writes, "Brothers, as an example of patience in the face of suffering, take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord. As you know, we consider blessed those who have persevered." James reminds us in these two verses that there has always been suffering in God's people. He illustrates this by drawing our attention to the Old Testament prophets. There's hardly a prophet about whom we have any information in the Old Testament that somehow couldn't show that he suffered. I think of Jeremiah, sometimes called the weeping prophet, whose messages were so unpopular that he was beaten, put in stocks, imprisoned in a dungeon, and thrown into a cistern. His life was one of perpetual physical and spiritual suffering.